I'm here for the history.
Tucked away in a tiny corner of the American Northeast, Massachusetts is the oldest of the 6 states that make up New England. It's surprising just how reminiscent of Old England the new one is, with the added seasonal plus of a show of vibrant colour every autumn or fall. After history, this is the big crowd pleaser. Boston is the commercial and cultural capital of the region, and it may have been around for going on 400 years and have reinvented itself as a trendy little place to live in, but it's the American War of Independence that put it on the map. In the heart of the city, there's Boston Common, America's oldest public park. During the War of Independence, the British camped here, and it's a good starting point for a trip back in time.
The city's made navigating its past really easy. Stretching for 2.5 miles from the Common to Charlestown Navy Yard is a thin red line in the pavement called the Freedom Trail. Follow it and you will literally stumble across all of Boston's major historic landmarks.
It can be confusing for the historical novice, as the sites come thick and fast, they aren't chronological, and like the Massachusetts State House, they didn't all play a part in the battle for independence. That's not true of the old State House, however, where the British fired on a mob, killing 5 in what was celebrated as the Boston Massacre. In fact, by the time you reach Faneuil Hall, you realize this town must have been a real pain in the butt for the Brits.
If anywhere can be said to have revved up the revolution, then it's this place. It was the town meetings held here that brought to a halt Britain's attempts to tax the colonies. The Stamp Acts and Townshend Acts were all successfully challenged here. And it was here the locals came up with the idea for the Boston Tea Party, the unceremonial dumping of £10,000 worth of British tea in Boston Harbour.
This is the home of America's #1 revolutionary hero after Washington, Paul Revere. The house is pretty unremarkable, though admittedly it's the oldest one in Boston. The trail eventually leads to Bunkers Hill across the bay in Charlestown.
The Battle of Bunkers Hill was the first major military engagement of the Revolutionary War. And the first thing you learn about it is that it didn't happen on Bunkers Hill, it actually happened on the next hill along, on Breed's Hill.
You can gen up on it all at the Bunker Hill Visitors Centre. Not that impressive, but what it lacks in 21st century finesse is more than made up for by the knowledgeable staff. A deep breath and the trail finally grinds to a halt at Charlestown Navy Yard, now a naval museum and home to the USS Constitution, otherwise known as Old Ironsides, for her performance in the War of 1812, when British shots apparently bounced off her sides.
If you're not into history, well, your visit to Boston won't be ruined, but you will miss out on what makes this place so important. This is the American Mecca, and I use that term quite precisely. It's the ancestral home of America's past, and at least once in their lives, every American aspires to make the pilgrimage here.
Well, they definitely aspire to come here. This is Beacon Hill, the prime loin of Boston real estate, and thus it ever was until the mid-19th century.
Now, here's a mystery. If you compare a map of modern Boston with an 18th century map of the city, there's an anomaly. That skinny-necked peninsula the British barricaded during the American War of Independence has somehow disappeared. There's a lot more land around. Well, what happened was, in the 19th century, the city fathers instituted a huge land reclamation scheme, one of the results of which was this area, the Back Bay.
The rich started moving in here, and it's never looked back. The shops on Newbury Street just reek of dosh. Nowadays, this is the place to have a pied-à-terre. Carly Simon and Ted Kennedy are just a few of the locals. There are a couple of other big names in this area that are hard to miss. The John Hancock Tower has the uncanny knack of changing shape depending on your vantage point. Opposite is its older neighbour, the Prudential Tower. Never popular, the Pru, as it's called, offers the visitor one major attraction, the Skywalk viewing platform.
Ugly the building may be, but if you're lucky with the weather, the views are fantastic. Just bear in mind that in the wake of September the 11th, you'll need photo ID to get up here.
The Pru is an office-cum-shopping mall combo, so there's also the chance to poke around the shops as you leave. The area that gets the thumbs up in the shopping sections of the guidebooks is around Fernale Hall and Quincy Market, which is a bit of a shame. This is shopping for tourists.
Quincy Market, once the Massachusetts wholesale emporium, is now a fantastic pit stop for tired shoppers to refuel in. It's a multinational takeaway that will leave you dazed and confused. Just be prepared for a lot of rough and tumble at lunchtime.
The locals shop at Downtown Crossing, Boston's mainstream retail drag, a tumble of chain stores with a little treasure twinkling in the middle. Filene's Basement's the one to head for if you've ever had a yen for cut-price designer clothing.
They're all bargains to begin with, but the deal is the longer something sits on the shelf, the cheaper it gets, so you could end up paying as little as 25% of the original price. You have to be something of a dedicated shopper, though, and be willing to rummage.
Not really my scene, and I have to say, not a patch on the New York designer equivalent Century City. It's hard to reconcile the shining Ally McBeal skyline scene from Boston Harbor with the grimy industrial reality that characterized the city's waterfront as recently as 20 years ago. Where hoodlums used to dump bodies, you can dump the kids for some educational entertainment.
Nowadays, aquariums are 10 a penny, and in my opinion, we should exercise a little discretion when choosing which ones to visit and which ones to avoid. This is Boston's fish tank, interestingly positioned across the road from legal seafoods, and I've been told it's one of America's best. We shall see. Kay is not the best aquarium I've ever visited. Barcelona's, for example, and Monterey's in California are much better, but it is one of the few attractions in the city the kids are going to get a real kick out of.
Or you could hop on a harbor cruise. The emphasis here is on, you guessed it, history. But there's just something about a boat trip that brings out the kid in all of us.
I've been on some good boat trips, and I've also been on some pretty lousy ones. This one is great. And what makes a good boat trip? Well, quite simply, plenty to look at. It's not too long, only 45 minutes. The commentary is very informative, and you get some fantastic views of the city. New England is America's culinary heritage park. The story of American food starts here, and thanks to a heaven-sent combination of produce from land and sea, that story is a rich old yarn.
The Union Oyster House, a Boston institution dating back to the 17th century, precies the whole thing, and we're not talking burgers. The great orator Daniel Webster was known to down 6 half-dozen oysters a time at this very bar.
All the American classics, pumpkins, cranberries, corn, they come from around here. Add to that New England's distinctive seafood, lobster, clam chowder, oysters. This is my favorite discovery. It's called Indian pudding made with molasses, corn and cinnamon. I think it'd be fair to say that this is a great culinary destination. Oh, I didn't even mention turkey.
Across the River Charles from Boston is Cambridge, and the twinning of the two towns has resulted in a global academic powerhouse. There are more than 60 colleges and universities here. The big two are MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Yes, you recognize it from the movie Good Will Hunting. Get a job here as a cleaner and you're made. And of course, Harvard, the College of American Presidents and Wannabes. JFK and Al Gore both studied here.
This is known as the Statue of Three Lies. It reads, John Harvard, founder, 1638. Well, first of all, he wasn't the founder. He donated his library to the university. Secondly, it wasn't 1638, it was 1636. And thirdly, the people who erected the statue had no idea what he looked like. All very ironic when you consider the motto of the university, it's Veritas, truth. A lot of tourists kick off their night out in Boston here. Yes, it's at that bar, the Bull and Finch pub, aka Cheers, the one the sitcom was based on. Now, there's usually a queue of fans here, eager to get in, but when they do, it must all come as a terrible shock, because it looks absolutely nothing like it did on TV.
It doesn't stop it from being a total tourist trap, though. For the late-night bar and club scene, head either to the theatre district, that's if you're looking for something a bit flashy, or this place, Lansdowne Road, for something a bit more urban distressed. Jake Ivory's an institution in these parts, thanks to the entertainment.
Boston's bars come into their own on Sundays. It's not that they're any more busy, it's just that the Puritan tradition runs strong in this city. And on Sundays, you can't buy alcohol over the counter in shops. The only place to get it is in a bar.
Coming up after the break, the Addams family, America's first presidential dynasty, furniture you wouldn't shake a stick at, and a pilgrimage to America's most famous rock. Way back before the Bushes, John Adams and John Quincy Adams were America's only father and son presidential team. John Adams was born here, and his son John Quincy was born 75 feet away here, both in the suburb of Quincy, 20 minutes from Boston city centre.
I'm a great fan of John Adams, but even a lot of Americans aren't that familiar with him. He was the driving force behind the Declaration of Independence. He, more than any other man, ensured Washington had the resources to win the Revolutionary War. He was the first American ambassador to Great Britain, the second president of the United States. He was a man of courage and great political conviction.
You can find out more about the remarkable lives of the father and son at the Adams National Historic Park. This house, bought by John in 1788, was the Adams family home through to 1927.
Surely the most peculiar aspect of John Adams's life is that he died on July the 4th, 1826, 50 years exactly after the Declaration of Independence, which he'd fought so hard for. Even stranger is the fact that Thomas Jefferson, the only other signatory of the Declaration to become president, died on the same day. Weird. The Berkshires, yes, that's how the name's pronounced, Berkshire, not Berkshire, are as stereotypical a slice of New England as you're likely to find. We're in the eastern part of Massachusetts, and the hills, woods, and villages around here are so uncannily like parts of the UK, I've got to pinch myself to remember that I'm in the States. The architecture, though, is classic colonial American, and whether you think it's tasteful or twee, the best place to get a dose of it is here in Stockbridge.
If there is a feeling of phoniness to this place, blame all those moneyed weekenders from Boston and New York who keep holiday homes here and preserve the place in whitewashed clapboard. Love or long to leave it, Stockbridge does give you a sense of New England's psyche. Having said that, one whitewashed town looks so much like another, so many visitors find themselves here at the Norman Rockwell Museum. Dubbed America's best-loved artist, Rockwell's work is as familiar as a box of cereal, which, by the way, was one of the many products he illustrated.
Rockwell received his first commission before his 16th birthday. It was for a series of Christmas cards, and some critics would argue that intellectually his work didn't evolve much beyond that level of schmaltz. While the rest of the art world was grappling with modernism, Rockwell was content to turn a quick buck and focus on wholesome Americana.
More than 300 covers for the Saturday Evening Post alone testify to his commercial sensibilities. Still, some of his later work displays an interest in difficult social issues.
This museum is a huge hit with the punters. Art that's easy on the eye. It's fun, it's entertaining, nostalgic, reassuring, but I wouldn't really describe it as challenging.
Massachusetts' reputation as a haven for religious dissidents can be seen in practice outside the town of Pittsfield.
Many of us think of Shaker as a furniture brand, that simply perfect yet perfectly simple, homely look, a sort of early IKEA. The Shakers were a religious sect, an offshoot of the Quakers. In fact, they were originally called Shaking Quakers because of the paroxysms of ecstasy they went into during their religious ceremonies. Anyway, the whole thing kicked off in Manchester, Old England, back in the 18th century, and we didn't like them very much, so we sent them over here.
The Hancock Shaker Village is a quality attraction that may sound as dull as a Puritan hen night, but it's actually worth poking around the 20 or so buildings here.
The beginning part of the hook here, a little scroll which is the beginning of the hook.
One of the highlights here is the early 19th century round stone barn, but the kids tend to prefer a bit of spinning or dressing up. The last Shakers lived here in 1960, not that they left. The community died out because they were celibate.
There were no Shaker babies, and even though they adopted orphans and brought them up in the Shaker religion, at age 18 everyone was given the same choice. Do you want to be a mover or a Shaker? And most of the kids decided to move on. I guess that celibacy thing wasn't such a selling point.
New England offers a great variant on the usual American motel experience. This part of the States is crammed with B&Bs, most of them very quaint, stuffed with antiques and period features, and a very personalised service. This one is Hollyhock House outside Pittsfield, and it's fairly typical.
Admittedly, this isn't everyone's cup of tea, but this is the genuine New England experience. And as for the breakfast, well, it knocks the socks off a lot of the fancier ones I've had around here.
Just one note of caution, you'd have to book somewhere like this well in advance if you were planning to visit in the fall. Staying in Boston requires equally careful planning.
Hotel rooms in Boston are really pricey, a situation aggravated by the fact that there are too few of them to go round. Good news, though, the city's in the middle of a building boom with lots of new properties opening up, and some of the newcomers are really funky.
This is a great example, the hotel at MIT, and that's just what it is, a hotel right in the middle of MIT. The technology theme is brilliantly captured. I have to say the service is fantastic, and even if you haven't brought your laptop, there's free internet access in the lobby. Just down the coast from Boston is the place they call America's hometown. Plymouth would smack of sleepy seasideness if it wasn't for the fact that it was here those pilgrims landed back in 1620. A reconstruction of their ship, the Mayflower, invites visitors on board. And just a shoal and a shingle away, there's the eponymous rock, where the saintly brotherhood is thought to have placed their communal feet. Don't get too excited. What there is dwarfed by a garish 19th century temple.
Plymouth Rock has America written right through it, but no one actually knows if it's the real McCoy. The first reference to it is in 1741, a good 120 years after the Pilgrims are meant to have set foot on it. But it is of immense symbolic significance for Americans. Lucky I wasn't expecting Gibraltar, eh? Despite its historical importance, Plymouth shares the calendar of other seaside towns, albeit with a slightly extended season. After Thanksgiving in November, this place closes for a chilly, blustery winter and doesn't open again until the beginning of April.
After the underwhelming experience of the Rock, here's one that's downright unsettling. On the outskirts of town, they've recreated the original Pilgrim settlement at Plymouth Plantation.
You know what these places are like, a group of guys in period costume demonstrating crafts or activities. You got a chance to compare life back then with now. Well, this place is different. Prepare to enter the Twilight Zone. What year is this?
1627 it is.
1627, sir.
No, Charles been on the throne a couple of years now. James died a couple of years ago, although smelled like he'd been dead for years, aye.
How long have you been doing this?
I've been here now, sir, 7 years or so. I came on the first ship.
And what were you doing before you came here?
I was a fripperer, sir, by profession. A merchant of some small stature.
What if I would say to you that your children's children would no longer want to be English and would want to separate from England?
Well, I don't think the world's still going to be here by then. Jesus coming back before that, don't you reckon? It ain't going to be no 1700, so fairly a moot question, I think. We'll hopefully find the lost tribes of Israel around here. Walking some Indian town around Shalom. Oh, there you are.
Oh, sanest thing you've said. Yes, they all think it's 1627, and do you know what's really frightening? After you've been here a while, you'll begin to believe them.
You can't blame me. The West Country accents, the totally authentic period homes with their vegetable gardens, even the neighbouring Wampanoag Indian village conspire to push your sanity to the brink.
Well, it's all a bit nutty, really. Makes Disney look normal, but the depth of research and enthusiasm is so genuine, you really get wrapped up in it all. Great fun.
After which, you're just about ready to head back to Boston for a Sunday shindig in Copley Square.
What struck me most about Massachusetts is just how un-American it is, and yet it's so quintessentially American. It's a place with one foot in the colonial past, all those British influences everywhere to be seen, and the other foot is firmly in the American present. Boston is a classic example of the paradox. So if you've never thought of visiting the States, in fact, it may never have appealed to you. This is the place that could change your mind. I'm a million miles from London, but in all my visits to America, I've never felt so at home.
Now for some facts to help you plan a visit to Boston and Massachusetts. Hot and humid in summer, cold and harsh in winter, the best times to visit this part of the world are spring and autumn. Fall, of course, is the most popular time to visit. And now for some costs. Well, a harbour cruise in Boston will set you back £11. For some art that's easy on the eye, head to the Norman Rockwell Museum. That'll cost you £8. And for a trip back in time, go to Plymouth Plantation. Admission is £13. For more information on Boston and Massachusetts, contact the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism on 0207 978 7429 or visit their website. And we travel to Boston with Continental Airlines via New York. Return flights start from £180, including taxes. Rooms at the hotel at MIT start from around £67 per night, and at Hollyhock House from £56 per night. A rental car from Hertz starts from £30 per day for a Group A car. We look forward to seeing you again very soon.